All right. Hi, everyone. And I'll get into my introductions with myself and my wife, which I'm sure none of you need an introduction for her. But this is a presentation that we will be presenting together at the DynamicsCon Live coming up in May, which has already been called out. So that you guys get an early preview of this presentation. So it's called Wield Power Automate to Slay Your Dragon-Sized Projects. So a little bit about me. So I will be your dungeon master for today. My name is Andrew Kiser. I've spent over a decade in customer service, IT support, and knowledge management. I specialize in technical writing and process improvement. I usually favor automation over for any repetitive tasks, but I actually left that sphere and that space a little over a year ago to pursue my passion of storytelling by starting Quills and Quests, which I'll explain a little bit more in a moment. Joining me is my wife. She's my supporting party, Kylie Kiser. Obviously, you guys are very familiar with. She is a solution architect with RSM Canada, a Microsoft MVP, and a fast track recognized solution architect. So today's agenda, we're going to go over how I got here with a little bit of my experience with IT and automation. We'll talk about the problem that I have in my current business needs, the solution that brought me how I brought my technical experience into the world of Dungeons and Dragons, the future of what else we can do with the tools we have available, and the solution for your solution, how you can take these ideas and apply them to your own business needs. So how did I get here? So again, I started off in the IT space for many years, and I gained a lot of experience in things like knowledge management, training others, and I started to learn how to identify issues and try to find technical solutions for them. So this is the kind of process I would go through. I would identify a problem, usually of overly complicated repetitive tasks that individuals would have to go through. I would research the tools to find the right way to be able to solve those issues or automate those the most efficiently. I would help design the solution to create that solution so that we can implement that tool to get rid of those repetitive tasks. I would then write the documentation and I would provide the training. So this is the kind of background that I had over the last decade of learning new technology and learning process automation and process improvement. Now, like I said, I left that sphere to start a company called Quills and Quests. This is where, through fantasy writings and games, I explore heroism as a means of self-improvement, promote mental health awareness, advocate for fair play, and foster creativity. I also highlight tools, resources, and individuals that empower personal growth and enhance gaming experiences. So now I am a professional dungeon master. If that's surprising to you, it was also surprising to me that that was even a career path. So I actually provide adventures on a website called Start Playing, which connects me with individuals all over the world to be able to provide games for them. I actually publish and write my own adventures that are for sale on various websites and storefronts that are part of the Dungeons and Dragons system, that I both write for Quills and Quests, and I also write for third-party individuals as well that I contract out with. And I coach new players and dungeon masters both online and at conventions such as Gen Con. Gen Con is actually the nation's largest gaming convention with over 70,000 attendees. And these are just some of the partnerships that I have with other organizations. Start Playing is there. That's the website that I run my adventures on. Drive Through RPG is where I publish most of my adventures. And there at the top is Foundry VTT. Now, I'm going to be talking mostly about that. It is an online software to be able to virtually run tabletop RPG games remotely. They gained a huge rise of interest during the COVID era. There was a lot of things online, and it's only grown since. So, and I'll get into a little bit of why why that software has been important for this flow process that I'll be going over. So why fantasy? J.R.R. Tolkien himself says that fantasy in this sense, I think, not a lower but a higher form of art, indeed the most nearly pure form, and so when achieved is the most potent. So I feel that, especially with Quills and Quests, that it's journeying through these fantasy worlds that we learn of the courage, the kindness, the hope, and the justice that it takes to face the difficulties of our real world. So why did I pick Dungeons and Dragons? Well, Dungeons and Dragons is a fantasy role-playing game where players create heroic characters to embark on imaginative, collaborative storytelling, adventures guided by a dungeon master's narrative. And this is something that I had education, formal education in creative storytelling, script writing, and that's what I went to college for. I just happened to get an IT job right out of college. And I stuck with that. That's where I got a lot of my professional experiences in the IT sphere. But in the back of my mind and in my heart, I wanted to get back to storytelling. But I'm sure a lot of you are asking, how is any of this relevant to Power Platform, Power Automate, and to these kind of professional discussions that we have here? Well, that's where this automation comes in. So a lot of research talks about how that companies can invest in automation and can achieve cost savings of 30 to 50%. And this includes reduced labor cost, increased efficiency, and minimized errors. And the reason that that's important, and the reason my background education is important, is that when I came into this sphere of creating adventures, running adventures online, doing all this stuff, it was a massive undertaking as far as the production value. And as far as how much content I have to generate and to create, as far as, I have to gather assets, I have to create assets, create projects, project management. It's a very involved process. And I was able to take my past IT experience and apply that to my new business model, so that I can actually provide my own automation for my own projects. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, is how I took something like the Power Automate desktop, which Matt went over a great overview, a very high quality overview of Power Automate for the cloud. Power Automate desktop looks a little bit different, and I'll be going over a very high level, basically a proof of concept of how I use it in my business to be able to take advantage of the fact that I have a lot of content that I need to create, but I actually have to do it all on my own, essentially, because I am currently the only employee of Quills and Quests. So it's a massive amount of content that I have to do and perform on my own. So just like in my old jobs, I had to identify a problem. So my problem is that I have to create my own and convert other publishers' adventures into multiple formats, such as PDF formats and the virtual tabletop format, which is the Foundry VTT software that I talked about earlier. And I sell these across multiple online storefronts. Now, these different formats and storefronts all have different requirements. A lot of them actually have JSON and JavaScript requirements that I knew nothing about when I started all of this. I had no training or experience with coding, with JavaScript, what even a JSON was. And I actually used Copilot, which then was Bing Chat, to actually teach me how to learn, how to read, how to use JavaScript, what JSON files are and how to use them. So I learned all of that on my own, mostly with talking with AI. Some classes or online material, YouTube videos I took as well, but mostly the training was through AI. So like I said, all these different formats and storefronts use different requirements, but they all use the same basic details, the core details. And again, as the only employee of Quills and Quests, I have to design these adventures, including all the required assets and marketing materials, all on my own for all of these different storefronts. And I have to keep track of all these requirements, assets, and progress of each of these projects. Now, a lot of times in my field or in my business, I consider a particular adventure to be an individual project. Now, I can create these from scratch for myself that I publish for Quills and Quests. Sometimes I contract with other publishers and I help write or convert their adventures as well. But basically, either way, whether I'm doing it for myself or another publisher, it's the same kind of process. So what I did is I researched tools to help me navigate all these different aspects and all these different parts, all these different moving parts. And I found that Power Automate is an incredible tool that even someone like me, that while I did work in IT for quite a while, I didn't have, again, any formal education or training in coding, processing, those types of things. So like Matt said, Power Automate is very much low code, and starting out for someone like me that is not involved in this kind of professional business side of things, I had no experience. So being able to pull a Power Automate, try to learn some classes through Microsoft Learn, and learn things like JavaScript kind of on the fly, it was very easy for me to come in and build out a solution in Power Automate that's very effective for my projects. And that, again, is the proof of concept that I'm showing today, is that someone even like me, that's kind of very far removed from the kind of professional work that you guys do, and especially my wife does, all the MVPs do, I was able to kind of hit the ground running pretty easily with Power Automate. It has powerful variables and granular control over how you can create processes and flows. And then, so what I had to do is I had to design a solution. So I had to define the variables, and I'll go over these over the next slides. But what I had to do is I had to define my variables. I had to create a single source of truth. I had to replicate all that information across all the different formats, and I had to execute the tasks. So this was the kind of foundational design of what I needed my Power Automate flow to do. So let's go over what my solution was, and we'll actually dive into actual Power Automate itself. So for an individual project, I had a lot of requirements. So the basic formats is I had to create a PDF document. I had to convert that information into my Foundry VTT software, which had its own infrastructure. It had its own way to navigate through that, its own requirements. And then I also create these adventures on my Start Playing platform, which is where I actually run these adventures for people live. So those are the different formats that I would create them. Within each of these formats, I had my adventure assets, where I had the written rules. I had to create the background maps that people would see when they're playing these adventures. I had to organize and create the art for the tokens and monsters. And these adventure assets, again, all have to be done for each format. Some of them have different requirements as far as the file type or the image size requirements, whereas, PDF documents, my image capacity is much smaller than something like my virtual tabletop. So those are all different. So it's not just, oh, I have one image and I can use it 3 different ways. No, I sometimes need it in a different format. Sometimes I need it in a JPEG versus a PNG. And so each of those formats had to basically replicate the same information, but sometimes in different ways. Again, for each of these formats, I had to create marketing assets. I needed promotional copy. I needed additional image that were specifically for each of the social media platforms. So again, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all of these have different image file size requirements, different lengths of text that I can put in the description, different way that they format their hashtags. So again, all of that has to be created based off of the same information, but it has to be replicated in different styles and formats. And then I have the storefronts. So I sell, again, I sell my adventures on multiple storefronts. I present them in multiple ways. So again, I present them on Start Playing. I sell them on storefronts like Drive-Thru RPG. Foundry VTT has their own storefront, and Roll20 is another online platform that I sell my adventures through. And I also promote these on YouTube. So it's a very complex amount of work. And again, while this is very nerdy kind of example, I think it's applicable to any kind of project that you run that has a recurring foundational starting point of how things are structured, how things need to be kind of handled out. and designed. And for instance, this is a current flow, and I'm not going to go over this flow specifically, but this is just a workflow of how complex these actual projects are. And this is for one individual project, how I have to create the content and then it branches out in all these different formats and files and folders, and I have to organize all of these. And it just gets so complicated. And that's why I use Power Automate. So let's go ahead and get into that. So let me open up Power Automate here. So within Power Automate, again, Power Automate Desktop looks a little bit different. So this is the flow that I use for my creation, and I'll go over each individual category. But the most important part is we have to set our variables. Variables are the kind of building blocks of how we create flows. So when we define our variables, these are placeholders for storing and managing data within a process. And in essence, setting variables in Power Automate is like using sticky notes to keep track of important data during your automation journey. It's a way to organize and remember your work. So as we come back to Power Automate, so what we'll do is we'll actually, in the set actions, we just type in set variable. And you can make this be anything you want. You can make it a string of text. You can make it be a large amount of information. But what you'll do is you'll type in something. So for me, I'll type in the adventure name. So let's say the adventure name is Siege of the Castle. Okay. So I'm going to rename this as my adventure title. And that's my variable. So the reason this is important is because this adventure title, Siege of the Castle, is replicated and used a lot throughout this process flow, whether it's naming files, whether it's creating content for the adventure itself, or creating marketing material. That name is going to be used over and over and over again. So instead of me manually typing out that name every time, I set a variable that allows me to basically tag and search based off of this title, adventure title, and I can quickly dump that in anywhere that I need. And I'll show you a little bit more of how useful that is. So we also use this to create a single source of truth. A single source of truth is an ecosystem where all critical information is stored, managed, and accessed. It's about having one definitive source of data where updates and changes are universally reflected. So the reason this is important, again, because I have a project that spans across so many different things, I'm able to use these variables to create a unique single source of truth for this specific project. I can create variables at the very beginning, and I use my document flow to be able to basically copy a template of what I created as a Word document as my single source of truth. And it's able to replicate the variables that I set, such as the adventure title, its description, how many players it's for. That gets dumped into my single source of truth, and I can access all of that information all at once. And I have to replicate this information. So using these variables again, I can create this templated single source of truth, and then I can replicate all this information across all my different formats and my various ways that I use them. Because variables can be customized, can be used to customize my names of my folders, my file names, and information inside actual documents. So this is something, an idea of what it would look like. I would have my single source of truth, which is my Word document, which contains all of the information of my adventure details. And this adventure could be 40, 50 pages long of information. And then it needs to be formatted differently again for putting it in my PDF and VTT formats. Then those have the full content. They have all 40, 50 pages. My start playing adventures and my marketing will only take segments or only take a short description or a brief overview of that information. My YouTube script will, again, take only segments, but it will need to highlight the advertising portions of it, but it can be longer than social media posts. And then I also create a blog post on my website. So all of these different formats I can craft out of my single source of truth using all of these variables. So let's take a look at my actual Power Automate flow. I have a flow with about 150 plus steps. And what I'll walk you through right now is how that I create folders and folder structures. I copy templates of my Word and JSON documents and rename them and reformat them to be applicable to my actual project. And then I interact with my unique software, which is my Foundry VTT. Right. So again, this is my actual flow. So I've broken this out into regions. Now, there's two different main ways that you can create subcategories of flows within Power Automate Desktop. You can create subflows, which is a great way to break these out into individual sections so that they're navigatable by these tabs at the top. And when you're actually inside of a flow, you can actually run subflow. So this says, I want to run the subflow of set vars or set variables. So you could do it by every section having its own subflow. Or you can create these regions. These regions are basically just containers that you can rename and add to create sections, basically. And this is great for when you're doing testing or when you need to rearrange things, or if you realize, oh, actually, these steps need to go before these steps. So instead of moving individual pieces, you can group large chunks together. So you can see here, my first section, I have 17 actions. My second region, I have 81 actions. And my third region, I have 41 actions. So let's take a look at the first portion that I created, creating folders and folder structures. So again, I have a lot of different folders that need to be created that need to contain all the different assets for all the different formats, right? So instead of me going in and creating this hierarchy and this structure every single time I create a new project, I run this flow and it creates all of the correct folder structure for me. And not only that, but it will, take basically, I basically create a template of how I want my structures to be, of how many folders deep I want this particular project to be, or, for my PDF, I may have 3 subfolders, but for my virtual tabletop version, I have 5 subfolders that each have 6 subfolders, just because it's a deeper project. So this creates all of my folders and folder structures for me, and it can name them correctly using the variables that I set up. So again, this is why variables are important, because when I create this folder structure, it's able to actually say, instead of just creating a folder that, instead of having 20 folders on my computer that all say PDF, it can actually have the adventure title or the project name as part of that folder name. So instead of having a bunch of folders that say PDF, I can have Storming the Castle PDF folder, right? And that's for that specific project. So it's scalable, and it's much more easier to navigate especially when you're collaborating with others and you want to be able to send them or tell them how to get to certain areas of your project. You can create these folders. Now, again, because I'm the only person working, I don't have this in my flow right now, but you can add portions of this flow to be able to notify individuals by email when these folders are created. So for instance, if I hired an artist on my team and I needed them to know that, hey, when this project starts and we have the folder structures created, you need to go into that folder and you need to add your art assets, or you need to update your time information, or whatever the case may be. But I can create their art folder that not only does it create folders, I can tell it to create individual files or copy files if I have templates. I can create individual files inside their art asset folder and send them an email. Hey, new project's been created. Here's the name of the project. Here's the file that you go to upload your assets. And here's a list of items that we need you to create over the next 2 weeks. So that's something that you could build directly into this Power Automate flow if you needed to, if you're working with multiple people to be able to do this. And the reason I'm structuring my project in this way is so that when I do hire artists, when I do hire more writers, I'll be able to do that, and my structure and my foundation will be organized in a way that it makes it easier to do that moving forward. So again, it creates all of these folders that are going to contain all of the different assets that I need. So that's a very, very simple part, right? So the next section is it actually can create files. So here it's talking about copying a file. So this is a template that I created that actually contains, actually I'll show you quickly. I'll jump back over to my slide. So I can actually copy out a template that I've already created. So for instance, I have a Q&Q content template. My flow will copy that and rename it based off of my variables, and then it can update the content inside the document, again, based off of my variables. So it can create me a checklist, and it can update information in here based off of the variables that I set, so that this template has been created, renamed, put in the correct folder that I need it to be in, renamed with the right project name, and have the right project information already put into this basically master file. And the same thing with my JSON files. So all of my virtual adventures that I do for Foundry VTT, the way they share and create information, it's a software that is sort of open source, and you can do a lot of modding and customization using JavaScript and JSON files. Again, I knew nothing of either of those before I started this, but I started to learn how to use them and write them. And now I use Power Automate to help me write them as well. So as you can see, I've got the ID, the title, the description, the compatibility versions. All of that information is controlled from my variables. So I can tell it to create or write a new file, or to copy a templated file, and make sure that all these information, the ID, the title, the description, are updated again from my variables. So now I'm taking my single source of truth, or my variables that I've set up, and I'm dumping them in different ways, in different formats, in the files that I need them. So now that I created my folder structure, now I'm creating my actual individual files that I need. Now this is done again just for me, but I could do the same for, again, if we go back to my artist example, if we have an artist that I know I need to give them a different document that has a different set of checklists and different names of monsters and that type of stuff, that can all be granularly controlled through the set variables. And so I can create multiple documents in multiple different folders for individual people that have individual needs catered to, based off of this flow. I can copy these templates, add the information that I need based off my variables, and get it to the right people for the right information. So it's incredibly powerful to be able to take large-scale projects and replicate the foundational structure of them over and over again. Which for me, every time I create a project or an adventure, it's exactly the same. I have to create the same folders. I have to create the same documents. I have to create the same JSON files. I have to create the same Word documents. All of that's exactly the same. So Power Automate is able to come in and replicate all those tasks for me. The next part is that it's able to do, which I think is the most impressive and the main reason that I chose to use Power Automate Desktop, is I can actually interact specifically with my Foundry virtual tabletop program. Now, again, this can be applicable to any particular software that you use in your company or in your projects that's specific to your work. Now, I can't do direct integrations with my software with Power Automate. At least I'm not at that level yet. So what I'm able to do is to use process flows like running the application, and I can manually program and tell it to click on certain UI elements. So what I do is I go into my program, I open the program up, I click on a specific element or box within that program, and I basically link it up to a UI element within Power Automate. So while I'm not directly programming in functionality with this particular software, I can have Power Automate interact with it. So what this does is it opens up my specific application. Once it opens it up, it launches this particular world that I use for testing or for running these projects in. And then it sends a certain amount of key presses that I know will get it to the right selection to be able to join a game session and start the process of creating the folders that I need within the software. So again, just like I have all these folders and folder structures set up on my computer, I also need a lot of the same kind of repetitive tasks done within my specific software. And again, this is very time consuming, it's very frustrating, and it's just super repetitive. And I don't want to have to do it over and over and over again for every new project that I do, but it has to be done. So instead of me doing it, going through the slog, I train Power Automate on how it can do it. So I have all of these button press, click UI elements, populate fields to be able to do what I want it to do. So let's go back to the presentation here. So again, this is interacting with my specific software. This is a screenshot of what Foundry Virtual Tabletop, my software, looks like when I open it up. And when Power Automate logs into a specific world, it's going to look a little bit more like this. So this is the software that I have with my map in the background that I created. And it has a bunch of UI elements over on the right-hand side. So what I'm able to do with my Power Automate is, number one, I tell Power Automate to click specifically on this icon in this element on my screen. Once you click there, I want you to hit the Create Folder button. Once you create folder button, a new GUI will pop up, and I'm able to insert the folder name. This folder name within my Power Automate, I can use variables. So I can tell my specific software to name this folder with my project name based off of the variables that I set earlier in the project, so that the folders within my software can also be specific to this particular adventure or project. And so I don't have to manually go in and type this myself. I tell Power Automate, hey, reference this adventure title that I've already created in my variables, and I want you to use that and create this folder name inside my software. And then finally, it hits the Create Folder button. Now, what I have to do when I create my adventures is I create this I do this creation of folders within my software, but I have to do it about 5 different times. So this, go to a certain section, create a folder, name the folder, and click Create Folder. That has to be done. You can't really tell it probably, but on this software, on the top right-hand side, there's a bunch of different icons. Those are the different categories. Those are map assets, character token assets, item assets, roll table assets, all these different assets. When I create an adventure, I have to create file structures within the software itself to be able to create all that information. So again, instead of me coming in here and doing it every time, I train Power Automate to not only do this once, but to do it for each individual element to create that structure for me. Then there is a process of combining all of these folders that I've created into a package. Essentially, that's what they call it within the software. I can also train Power Automate to create the package, to add the folders that I created to this package, name the package with the set variables that I created, and add the adventure description to the package that I also created in the set variables. And all of that is done within my software, all done automatically for me with Power Automate. Now, something that I won't go into too much detail because I want to get to our next section, and I don't have screenshots for this, but what I also able to do is once I create that package for for Foundry. Essentially what it does is it creates a manifest, JSON manifest folder that I'm able to go in, and basically that's what I take and put on these storefronts or these manifests. And the different storefronts have different requirements in my JSON file of the formatting of what different categories I add in the JSON file. So what I'm able to do is take this, what I created for my software, use my Power Automate to grab the newly created package, JSON package, and then edit it and create a new version. Basically, I copy it, rename it, and then edit it with the correct details for the other storefront, so that now I have my JSON modules created correctly for my different storefronts. And again, all of this is done through Power Automate. I'll quickly jump back in there so you can see. Again, so I create my multiple folders, and then this and creates the package for me. And you can see how detailed and granular this is. I create the package, and then it goes on to my JSON manifest, and I can actually tell this to zip a folder for me, copy the zipped folder, and then go into my manifest file, update the user path, update the file names for the different format that my other storefront uses, create all this information, update all my files, and then once it's done, it rezips the new folder. And so that I have two zip folders, which is the format that I needed for these storefronts. I have two zip folders that all contain the correct information in the correct format. So this was all complex project work that I had to do that was just highly repetitive and just took a lot of time. It was very, very time consuming, but I'm able to take this Power Automate to be able to replicate all of that information for me so that I don't have to do it myself. So again, that's a very high level high level proof of concept of how I use it in my business, how I use it to create my projects. And again, this is kind of the same that I use if I create an adventure for another. When I contract out with other publishers, I do pretty much the same process. I use a slightly different flow just because I'm not creating things myself, but it's the same basic idea. And I also have a separate flow created so that if I'm given basically a PDF document, what I can do is I can dump that PDF into my Power Automate. Power Automate will grab all of the text out of the PDF, copy all the text out, put it into a new Word document for me. Well, I don't know if anyone's ever done this. When you copy text directly out of a PDF file, sometimes the format's really wonky and just unusable. It's unreadable. So what I've done is I've used a series of find and replace, very complicated find and replace within Word that I've trained through Power Automate to be able to find those weird formatting errors and issues that come out of a PDF format, basically run through the whole document, correct all of those issues for me, clean it up, make it look really nice, and then have this new document for me that I can then work out of. Before, it would take me 2 or 3 hours to go in and manually do that myself, to be able to read through, copy and paste individual information out of a 40-page PDF document. That was really heavy work. Now all I have to do is dump this into Power Automate. It grabs all of the text out, dumps it into a Word file, cleans it up the way that I need it to be cleaned up, and then presents it in a way that I can then work out of, which saves me a couple of hours work. So again, that's my kind of high level view. So let's talk about the future. So I think I'm going to toss this over to Kylie. She's going to talk a little bit about how we can use AI to further increase the ways that we get inspiration for creative ways. And this can be used for any project, but this is how we're going to try to use it for creating my adventures in the future. So Kylie, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, for sure. If you want to keep sharing your screen until the demo, I'll just tell you when to go to the next one.
Sure.
So yeah, when we were thinking about this presentation, we wanted to think like, okay, like this is a lot of cool stuff, like what's happening now, but let's think about what other tools exist in the Power Platform and also what new stuff is coming, and how could we do something fun to add an extra demo to this presentation. So if you go to the next slide, some of the things that we were talking about is like, how can we incorporate AI, and we want to use tools like AI Builder, Power Apps, maybe Cloud Flows, and talking about other connectors. And so I have a few like little demo things we're going to show you, and then we're going to also talk about, okay, and if we could continue on from that, what even extra additional items could we do from there? I will do quick warning, I will need a volunteer who will be able to talk on their mic. So you have 3 slides to decide if you want to volunteer. So if you go to the next slide, we'll see what we're going to talk about. So in this demo, we're going to have an AI Builder prompt for doing monster creation. So everything that Andrew's been talking about is kind of around, okay, I've already written the adventure. Now let me get that published and sell the adventure, right? But instead, from this side, we want to talk about what can we do to actually help with before that? How can we build the adventure in an easier way, right? We're going to use a Power App to enter some of those core details. We're going to randomize our stats, and then we're just going to use a Cloud Flow to email out those details. So on our next slide, I think we have a screenshot of what the AI Builder prompt looks like. So if you haven't played with the AI Builder prompts, they're really cool. So formerly, when this first came out, you saw we had the AI Builder ChatGPT model, and you could just add that model and just kind of ask it whatever, kind of free form. Now they let you design your prompt with the variables and the different pieces that go in there. So we created one that said, okay, here's what information we're going to provide, and I want you to provide back to me the monster description, basically. And so then we put that into a Power App on the next slide, I think, which kind of looks like this. So we're going to take in those core informations. Like I said, we're going to randomize the stats, and then we're going to, from that, it will come up with a description and actually an image prompt. So something else that we talked about was kind of in next steps, right? Is I want to use designer, image creator, co-pilot, whatever you want to call it, to actually create some of the art that will go into this adventure and either be used in Foundry, Roll20, or just the the book in the PDF of the adventure, right? And so right now there isn't a connector for image creator, but I can generate the prompt and then I can work with that to generate my image. And I think lastly, we have one more slide, I think. Oh yeah, so we're also randomizing some stats. So when you are generating a monster, there's certain information here, like you see in the screenshot, like the armor class that's the same for all these monsters, but their hit points and their damage per round can be between a certain range. And so we're just using Power FX to design a formula to create what we want those to be. And, we could expand this to be more robust on a lot more factors. Right now, we only selected a few challenge ratings and then use the chart, the recommended Dungeons and Dragons chart of how you set those up, and use that to do our random between. So obviously lots of ways we can make this more complex, or we could even make these separate inputs and pass them all separately to the model if we wanted to. And then I think we have one more slide that we also created an easy Power Automate just to email this. So we put in the details in here and we're going to email it out. So the idea was, hey, I generated this and I want to save it and put it into my adventure, right? And like I said, in the future, we could use a connector to maybe even generate that image. And even further, I think what would be really cool is if we could kind of expand this to not just generate a monster, but could we generate part of the adventure? And could we send that to Power Automate to build out a PDF, or what can we use to kind of start build it in a more automated and AI fashion, right? Is it time for the demo, or do I have another slide?
You have one more about the image prompt to designer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so this was, like I said, we do have the image prompt that you can copy it, and this is one we actually generated the other day. So all we put in was the name and the type, and then we generated the description and the image prompt, and this is the image that came up. So I'll take over now and show you a quick demo. I do need my volunteer, so if someone wants to raise their hand. Oh, I lost my Teams. Let me find it back. I need a volunteer. Oh, we have two. Mike, you raised your hand. Was there someone else? We can do it twice. We'll do it twice. We have time. Okay, Mike, you can go first, then Keith. So, Mike, you need to give me a name for my monster. And it can't be a person's name because sometimes it got mad at content rating.
Let's go with Slagathor.
Slagathor. Like that?
Yeah.
All right. What size should they be?
Huge.
Excellent. And what of these types would you like them to be?
I think either. Let's go with monstrosity.
Monstrosity. Excellent. And how terrifying do you want them to be?
I'll just go with 1.
Okay, we'll stay with 1. So we'll click randomize stats. That's using the rand between, and then I'm going to click this monster description. And while that's running, I think I have in my other tab here, we have our AI builder prompts. So these are just what I showed. We can open those up. And yeah, it's just you put in the details and then you're sending a variable for those items. And our other one go away. Okay. You can see our other one here too. So we're just putting in a few variables and then we send those variables via Power Apps. All right, so our description was generated here, and you'll see Slagathor strikes fear into the hearts of adventurers, hulking and muscular physique, covered in a thick, scaly hide resembling molten rock. And you'll see, so we have their abilities here, and it also generated their spells. So we asked it to be like Dungeons and Dragons 5e, and I asked it specifically to generate spells. And so it's putting in spells that are actually Dungeons and Dragons spells here that it can use. And something we also thought was really cool is when we did some of these like flamethrower, or what was we had another one that had like something that sounded like fire in the name. It actually generated a monster with like fire properties, which was pretty cool. So here you see we got
thing.
Sorry?
Flame thing.
And here you see we got our generate our image prompt here. Let's copy this guy into, I'm going to leave out the title, and I'm just going to copy all of this over into Copilot. Now, something that's cool that we should call out is, no, I want to be on Copilot. Stop switching. Something that's cool to call out is if you're in Image Designer, there's a text limit to how long your information can be, but that doesn't exist. Artwork, yeah, that doesn't exist in this Copilot. So what actually happens is when I submit it here into Copilot, is it will no. Mistakes. This is not what we wanted. Stop. Start again. Restart.
Create an image.
Try again. It's because it said create stunning artwork, not create me an image. Create an image. All the ones in our samples worked successfully. But what's kind of interesting though is that Copilot will actually take what? Failing. We're failing. Our other ones worked beautifully, and let me pull one of those up so you can see. But what you can see here is we put in this long description that came out of the app, and then it decided it here sends a different description actually to image designer, because it looks at all of this and condenses it into exactly what designer needs for that image. Let me try one more time to see if I can get this to work. I can't give a response right now. No, go back. Let's try again. Start again. New topic. New topic. And then we'll do another. Okay, create an image for. And then, Keith, if you're still here, we can get your details for your monster that hopefully will work. Ah, this is upsetting. It's okay. Keith, would you like to provide a monster, even if we can't get our image prompt to work? AI is always changing. It can't be predictable.
Yeah.
So my monster's name would be Kraken. So half cat, half Kraken.
Is this how I spell it? Cat.
That sounds terrifying.
Ken. Something like that? No, there needs to be a K in there.
A-K-E-N.
A-K-E-N. Yeah. How big should they be?
And it would be extremely, it should be tiny.
Okay.
Because it's going to be like an ankle biter.
Okay.
Sorry.
What type should it be?
I'd say beast.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Challenge rating?
How about 1/8?
Sure.
1/8.
Super tiny.
All right, we're going to randomize our stats. That looks good. Generate our prompt. And you'll see, okay, so what did it say about our cat Kren?
I went with cat and chicken.
Oh, we tried.
So it didn't quite get what we wanted, but it's still kind of funny. And grace and agility and lightning speed. And you can see this is a little bit different too. Like it generated more of a stat block that it didn't generate for the other monsters. So that, which could be potentially in our prompt, right? Narrowing down what we want to say in our prompt and making sure we're getting all the details we want. But you see we are getting their actions and skills and all of that too. And here's our prompt. Oh yeah, this is more what we're expecting. Create an image of this. We're going to copy that guy and we're going to see if it'll work in our Copilot. I'm going to refresh, get a new topic, and try again. Cat chicken hybrid. I'm sorry we didn't get your cat Kraken hybrid, but I still feel like the cat chicken hybrid could be an excellent monster.
Well, there you go.
I love him. But yeah, you can see here how we put in this whole big description, and then the description that it actually sends to Copilot is a little bit smaller, or that it sends to the image designer is a little bit shorter. Andrew, you want to take back over with the rest of the presentation?
Sure. Yep.
I think we just have a few minutes left, and the last things we really wanted to cover were, obviously this is kind of a silly use case, and showing how we can do kind of fun things with all of this. And so, we're on the wrong slide. But we kind of wanted to talk about, also think about how would you guys use this in kind of an organization scenario, or, what have you learned from this that you think you could apply in other areas?
Sorry, I'm trying to start it from the middle.
No problem.
There we go.
I got a question. I'm curious about Power Automate Desktop. I've never used it. How do you scale the desktop version of the Power Automate if you're going to use it in a large organization? Because it runs on the desktop. The governance, the updates of those applications is going to be a huge challenge.
Yeah, I think I don't think either of us are an expert on the enterprise rollout of this. But I think there's a few points, right? Like the desktop that Andrew's working on is the one that comes with, with Windows that anybody can use for automating on your machine. But when you want to do this at a larger scale, then that's when you'd look at remote process automation, right? The Power Automate desktop RPA, and then you'd be doing, you have to worry about all of that licensing and then do that on your, that would be running on those remote machines, right?
Yeah. Are there something that the Power Automate Desktop can do that the cloud version cannot do, the SaaS version cannot do? What's the big difference between those two?
I think the big difference is the scale, like you talked about, right? Because our desktop version is just going to be for one person, and it's it all has to be able to run on your machine, and I think you're only running one at a time, whereas when you start doing it on the cloud, you're going to could be running on multiple virtual machines at once, and large volumes of those, right? But in terms of the actions, I'm actually not sure how different they are. I do think when you're talking about the RPA, you can also make use of connectors and those sorts of things, and we can't do any of that on desktop.
I like the interface of the desktop very much compared to the cloud version, because you can close and open up. On the cloud version, when you grow, the workflow gets so big, it's a challenge to manage. The desktop it's so clean, you can collapse and you can open it up, but I just don't know the cloud version can do that. I like that interface very much.
Yeah, and what I'm not familiar with too is there a path that I can take what I did on desktop and push it up into RPA? I'm just not really familiar.
Yeah, I think the big difference too is like everything in Cloudflows is API driven. So connectors obviously have to connect through APIs as opposed to like what Andrew was showing, which is you can actually click a button, right? There's no API. There may be an API behind that button, but if there's not, then you have the ability to actually simulate human interaction with things, right? That you can't do in Cloudflows. So.
Right. Yeah. From my limited experience, the biggest benefit of a desktop a desktop Power Automate is being able to integrate with very specific software that, like for me, is never going to see integration with Microsoft products, right? So being able to manually tell it where on the screen to hit things and to do stuff, that's something that you wouldn't be able to get on a Cloudflow. But you do lose out on the access of what you can do on the cloud and running those API interactions, and you do lose a lot of functionality there. But it does have its purposes.
I like that point because I used to work for a creative agency, and we used to do a lot of Apple script. Just do exactly what you're talking about. You can automate so much doing the interfaces through the Apple script. This is very good stuff. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. I think we're at the end of our time. So Andrew, if you want to skip ahead to our last contact us slide. So if you guys have any further questions, feel free to reach out to us or let us know, even if you have feedback on this session for future times that we're going to work on it. And per the question in the chat, this has been recorded and it will be posted on my YouTube once Aiden shares the recording with me. And I can share that link with you guys momentarily. And just thanks everyone for joining, and hope everyone has a lovely evening.